was rocking yesterday. Joined on a sunny Sunday as the sun shines outside, really, really warm. So apologies if you can hear a fan going, but joined by Mark Turner and Forest fan Steve Bennett, both Forest fans, both regulars to the podcast, who will hopefully tell us we're not going to concede 12 on the final day. Although you never know, it is Forest. Steve, let's start with you at the game yesterday, as I was. What did you make of it? And just everything leading up to it, really, because I think everyone kind of went into the City ground in a very ecstatic mood after the events from West Ham and Tottenham.
Yeah, I mean, I got to the stadium a bit early and was there with my son Andrew, and we were sort of in the concourse at the back of the Bridgeford end, and everybody was, watching the scores. And then this sort of cheer went up as West Ham scored a second, and then Spurs scored, and then West Ham scored a third. And I think at that point everybody went, right, it's all over, and the party started. And it's intriguing, isn't it, that 15 minutes to go, Callum Hudson-Odoi's great but now typical goal really got the party started. And then, as you say, things didn't go quite as well in the last 15 minutes. And here we are the day after going, we're not going to lose a 12-goal deficit to Luton, are we? And I guess that says everything about being a Forest fan, really. How you can go from great party to ecstatic party to complete doubt, all in the space of about 2 hours.
Yeah, typical Forest. And we were just talking actually before we came and recorded this about that Stoke game and how to never ever trust Forest after that. I'm going to start the podcast with possible permutations for Forest to be relegated next week. Burnley could win 11-0 against Forest. Luton would have to win 1-0. Burnley could win 10-0. Luton could have to lose 10. Luton win 2. Burnley win 6-0 against Forest. And Luton win 6-0. I mean, come on, it's surely not going to happen, although you never know. Mark, what did you make of the game? Watching it from, I'm assuming, a sunny States, and just the atmosphere, probably, I guess, in your living room, or were you out and about watching it somewhere in Colorado?
It's funny you should say that. I did have plans to go to the pub. Those unfortunately got waylaid. So yeah, it was just me and the poor dog again, who had to deal with my screaming. When that Callum Hudson-Odoi goal went in, I literally, I mean, you might be, I'm a little bit raspy still. I drove myself hoarse when that ball hit the back of the net. It was, fantastic. And Steve's right. I mean, that's typical Forest. It felt like we had our fairy tale ending, right? Callum Hudson-Odoi, of all people, scoring the goal that secures our Premier League safety, only for ... But I am delighted, Max, to be almost proven wrong. Obviously, I've been a bit of a naysayer here on the pod these last few months. But I was looking back over my notes from a pod, Max, when I think we had 9 games to go. And you asked me whether I thought Forest would stay up. And I said, obviously, I want them to, but I'm really not sure that they will, because I'm not sure where the points are going to come from. And I did some quick math and calculated. I actually thought we might beat Chelsea yesterday, and I thought the best we could get out of Burnley was a point. Ending the season on 34 points, which I speculated wouldn't be enough to stay up. We're on 29 points. If we get the draw against Burnley in the last game of the season, which I thought we'd get, that puts us on 30, and we know where the other 4 points are. So actually, my math would have been pretty darn good. But it is still just remarkable that we may end up staying in the Premier League this year on 29 points, which is, again, it feels very Forest.
Yeah, it does. It's the worst, shall we say, almost the teams in the relegation battle have been for a while. 35 points is normally the average for clubs to stay in the Premier League in recent seasons. I mean, albeit that if Forest didn't have the 4 taken off them, we'd still be 2 points, 1 point away from that record. So, right. I've
got to say, I thought there was a great tweet today. I saw that this season PSR has done better than that Derby side in 2007, 2008, because PSR got 8 points from Everton and 4 points from us, and that's 12, and Derby only got 11.
Yeah, but PSR need to be careful, Steve, because they now need to sell a big player in the summer in order to stay within the parameters. So they're not going to be the same team this next year.
Yeah, let's see.
We are live on Facebook and YouTube, I will add. Nick says, fantastic atmosphere yesterday. Mission accomplished. Chelsea are on form and have spent mega money on talent. An absolute pleasure to be at the City Ground. Steve, let's start with your kind of overall thoughts on the game, and in particular, the start. And we talk about the party atmosphere. Everyone kind of goes into the City Ground. Mullikintai was excellent yesterday. We'll touch on the chance about staying at the City Ground later on in this podcast. But I thought, we started really brightly, and for the majority of the game, it was a solid performance. The players seemed up for it. They showed that passion, that fight from the off, and really went for it, particularly in almost the wide areas. Obviously, Callum Hudson-Odoi, we're going to touch on loads in a minute, and the same with Ola Aina, who had a brilliant game. And it just seemed like, as you just said, almost in a way, you go from Ecstatic to then typical Forest, but it was a solid performance, take away almost the 5 minutes of madness.
I mean, I think it was, what can you say? It was very encouraging. It was a really strong performance. It was great to be at the City Ground and not feel any pressure, because in a sense, the other results had hopefully, goodness me, have taken that out of our hands. We played really well. I thought Chelsea was at times, I mean, it started in a frenetic style and then it sort of calmed down to a pre-season friendly. And it was like one of those games when you play, a European side before the season actually starts, in a bright sunshine in the stadium, and everyone's really just sitting, having a beer and going, yeah, this is just an exercise. And Chelsea, for me, just didn't look bothered. And I kept thinking they're there for the taking. And, we played really well. I mean, to hit the woodwork 3 times in the second half, Callum Hudson-Odoi's goal. For me, the biggest change was the substitutions. And there are 2 elements to that. The level and quality of player that Chelsea were able to bring on in comparison to the level and quality of player that we brought on. And then that throws up the question, why on earth did we make some substitutions? I mean, there are so many times, aren't there, where we've had games when we've gone, Ryan Yates is not the technically most gifted player in the world, but flipping heck, he works hard. He knows how to play. He was doing a really good job against Cole Palmer, and he looked stunned when he was taken off. And why take off somebody like Ryan Yates with 15 minutes to play in that sort of fixture when you're 2-1 up? And that then caused, I think, disruption in the Forest setup. Chelsea brought on, when you bring on Ryan Sterling and Reece James and their other, mega players, it reminded me a little bit of the Spurs game where we were on top, and then at half time he brought on Bentancur and Højbjerg, just better quality players off the bench. But it was disappointing to lose it, and therefore I think it does bring into question some of the decision making, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, some of the decision making, and for me, some of the leadership off the pitch in terms of how those decisions are made. So very encouraging. If we play like that next Sunday, then you can come out, you can come away with your Hawaii shirt and everybody will be very happy, Max. And yeah, we've done enough but goodness me, 29 points is a ridiculous total to have after 37 games, even allowing for the 4-point reduction.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether I do get the Hawaiian shirt out. I'm undecided yet, because mathematically we aren't safe. It would be the most Forest thing, wouldn't it, to do to concede 12 on the final day while everyone stood there in their Hawaiian shirts. It's not going to happen, I keep telling myself. Mark, do you agree there? And in particularly before we look at standout performances and the positives from yesterday, because there was plenty, but it was poor substitutions again, and Nuno's been criticised a lot for that in his short tenure as Forest manager. But as Steve said then, why bring off Ryan Yates? I don't think, I don't think Chris Wood should have stayed on the pitch as long as he did. I think they maybe should have even made the change earlier with Taiwo. Again, he's almost in this goal drought that he's come towards. And also bring Elanga on. Elanga has massively gone off the boil, and it just felt like almost Forest didn't need to make substitutions for once. And they really did impact the game, and almost poor in-game management, you could argue, from Nuno.
I mean, it's always easy to be wise after the fact. We bring these players on in good faith. You believe they're going to do something, whether it's turn the tide, whether it's address something the other team are doing. In the case of Ryan Yates, obviously, as you know, I'm his biggest fan. And so I did not want to see him withdrawn, but I don't know how well you guys could see in the stadium. He was involved in that tackle, I think it was in the first half, and they actually removed his shin pad. And so we could see on TV, he had a nasty gash on his leg, and it already looked like it was starting to swell up. So there may have been issues there that necessitated him being withdrawn. I agree with you, Max. I'd like to have seen Taiwo come on earlier. Chris Wood right now, I don't know what's going on. I'm not going to say, oh, Chris Wood, he's rubbish and this, that, and the other. He's had a fantastic year for us, and we're grateful for him in the absence of Taiwo. But yeah, clearly the last half dozen games, he's just gone off the boil massively. So it would have been nice to see Taiwo get on there and bully the Chelsea defenders. And I know we're supposed to be talking about Forest today, but I have to say the substitution that buoyed me the most, given that my attentions are starting to turn. Anyone who's watching online can see my England mug here that I'm drinking, that of Reece James. No, obviously, I wasn't happy to see him provide the assist for what ended up being the winning goal, but it certainly was nice to see him back on the field and bolster England's Euro prospects further.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just wonder, unfortunately, whether it's too late for him. I mean, I'd love to see him go to the Euros.
He's one of Gareth's favourites. You know how it goes.
Yeah.
I think Ivan Toney might still end up on the plane, and I don't know how. So,
no. Anyway,
yes. Anyway, back to Forest. We'll talk Euros in a few weeks. Mark says, amazing atmosphere. We shouldn't have lost that game. Certainly poor last goal to concede. Yeah. And again, poor subs, changes when not needed. Bolly, very good. And Aina. This one from Andy, similar to the Luton game at home, from winning positions and give up 2 goals in the matter of minutes.
Max, can I just say very quickly on the Aina thing? About 10 minutes into the match, I was like, he is on fire today. And then I sort of made a point of watching him in isolation and also in context with the rest of the game. I'm going to get all hyperbolic here. Outside of Palmer, MG Dub, and Murillo, I don't think there was a better player on the field yesterday.
Yeah.
Aina was fantastic.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
And what a free transfer.
Right.
Although, I mean, I think he has signed for a further year, hasn't he? As has Chris Wood.
Yeah. I'm happy with both of those.
Which I think is good. Yeah, it's good news on both. Yeah.
We'll touch on Aina in a minute. Wanted to get your thoughts, Mark, on typical Forest almost conceding 2 very quickly. It almost is the story of this season, and that's got to be something they have to work on in the summer. There's a lot of talk whether a new coach or anything like that, but let's say that Nuno's here and it's part of the rebuild project, then that has to be such a big thing that him and his coaching staff and also the players on the pitch just simply have to work on, because it almost seems to be this mentality thing, doesn't it, of conceding quickly. And you almost know when Forest score a goal, we're going to concede and they're going to go down the other end and score straight away. It's almost inevitable.
Yeah, it's the number one thing. It might be the only thing, actually, Max, that they need to be focusing on this summer, because I think midfield through attack is pretty good. We need to deepen our attack. We've said this many times this season, but for a team of Forest's stature to essentially have one fit number 9 is ridiculous. So hopefully Taiwo, his fitness issues are resolved for this next season, and it doesn't impact us as negatively as it has this year. But I still feel like we need another number 9 on the squad anyway, a good one, not a Rigi. Beyond that, if we can hold on to everybody, then I feel pretty good about what we have in midfield and going forward. Defence is where the work needs to be done. The good news is that we have the raw talent there. We have a lot of experience and maturity in guys like Bolly and even Nikati, who I know is not an old head, but he's been around the block. He was obviously captain of his former team in the Bundesliga. So we have some guys in there who know what they're doing. And then I think we have some good young talent that can be molded as well. Again, assuming we can hold on to, in particular, Murillo. So, but yeah, I mean, one thing I will say, Max, yesterday about conceding, we didn't concede a goal from a set piece. Can we celebrate that?
Yeah, so a round of applause. Yeah, you're right. Almost another positive to come from yesterday was not conceding from a set piece.
Yeah, I put on Twitter yesterday because
and we scored from a set piece.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And that was the moment, Steve. I put on Twitter, I'm like, isn't it refreshing to be playing another team in the Premier League who are just as bad at set pieces as we are? Like Chelsea were pretty poor at both ends with their set pieces, so kind of equalised things.
Yeah.
We can put that in the trophy cabinet for this season. It'll take pride in Marianakis' trophy cabinet. Wanted to talk talk about Ole Einar, and you mentioned there, Mark, how brilliant he's been, and I just feel like at the moment, and he did it against City, up against Kyle Walker, and we saw him kind of almost skin him, as you like, a lot, and he almost seems free, and he's in that attacking role. It creates space. He's with Callum Hudson-Odoi. They've got kind of a great partnership going on, and he just seems to be such a key player, doesn't he, Mark?
Yeah, he really does. And it's come out of nowhere. I think that obviously as a fan base, we knew what to expect from Toffolo. We'd seen him the previous year in the Championship. We knew what to we thought we knew what to expect from Montiel after having seen him in the World Cup. Can't believe we've got an entire season and he hasn't taken a penalty. That being said, we've been given one penalty this year or something ridiculous. So yeah. But if we get one against Burnley, I'd love to see him take it on his send-off. That's what I'm hoping.
Miss it.
That'd be very Forest. But no, Einar's been a breath of fresh air. And the thing I think that's most impressive about him is he's gotten stronger as the season's gone on. And I think he and Nico Williams have been a real high points for us defensively this year, in a defense that's kind of been all over the place, and it's been predicated on individual high performances. Like, Murillo had a fantastic game, but as a unit, we didn't play well, and look, we conceded from 2 corners again. But so that's kind of been the makeup of the season. But I think Einar and Williams have been really solid, and like I said, they've gotten better as the season's rolled on.
Yeah, for sure. And,
Max, I think it's interesting about Einar, and I wonder if there's a connection. His performances in the last 5 or 6 games have just been exceptional.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that coincides with the announcement that he got a contract for next year. And I've touched on this before. We forget sometimes that these players are human beings. And therefore, if you're somewhere like Einar and he's come to the club, and then all of a sudden he knows he's secure for another 12 months. All those pressures about where am I going to play next season? Where am I going to live? Where's my family going to be? Are taken away. And he can then look forward to next season. That's got to have a positive impact on the person, and therefore a positive impact on the way that those people play.
Yeah. No, it's a really nice point. Totally agree. This comment from Nick as well, which is quite interesting. We've had Cash Lolly, then Spence, Brennan Johnson. Now it's Ole Einar and Callum Hudson-Odoi. That's a really good point, actually.
Isn't cash lolly, aren't they interchangeable words for money? I love that. It just occurred to me.
Yeah. Do you know what, Mark? I was actually talking to a friend about that the other day. We always talk about iconic commentary lines. And when Matty Cash scored late on, I think it was against West Brom a few seasons ago in the promotion winning season, and the commentator said, Matty Cash, priceless. It was brilliant. Favourite commentator lines ever. God, if we could have Matty Cash back, hey. But who needs him when we've got
Cash back?
Yeah. This isn't turning into a fun podcast. Come on.
It's like the Carry On podcast over here.
Yeah. God, it's a hard.
Steve, Max won't know what the reference is to Carry On.
No, I do. No, I've heard of it.
I was thinking of the days of Nigel Doty.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Right, moving swiftly on. Let's talk Callum Hudson-Odoi and just how brilliant he's been and been recently as well. 8 goals for him this season. It just brings that creativity, that attacking threat, and defenders still letting him almost cut inside and having that trademark Hudson-Odoi goal against his former club. So nice to see, Steve. Kind of what have you made to Hudson-Odoi recently, and how crucial can he be next season as well?
I think it's, and I hadn't done this deliberately, I think it's probably related to my last point. He's settled. He's in a side who know how he's going to play. He's playing with players who know where he's going to be. He's comfortable. And then all of a sudden he's got a good run of games. And guess what? He feels better about himself and his performance improves. I was at, I remember going to the FA Cup game against Bristol City away. And there was a guy behind me in the crowd who, and I can't repeat what he was saying, but he gave Hudson-Odoi absolute dog's abuse, to the point where, and I quote, he was the worst player he'd ever seen play football. Why was he on a pitch, etc., etc., etc. And there were a number of us who had to have a word with this guy behind us, because he was just abusive. And almost since that moment, he's been fantastic. And I think it's, I do think that if you think of what's gone on beforehand for Hudson-Odoi, his time at Chelsea, he had a bad injury and then he got released by Chelsea and it didn't really work out. He's found a place he loves playing in with other players who he gets on well with. I mean, it's clear the relationship that there is between him and Alanga. Alanga was fantastic early in the season. He's dropped off a bit, and we can come on to reasons for that. I think there's some, I think some of the players are just exhausted, but I think Hudson-Odoi is coming to his own. And therefore the prospects for him for next season are really, really strong. And let's be clear, the fact that we are safe, goodness me, we can now start planning for next season. And it's only May the 12th. I mean, that's a big difference. Because otherwise, I think if we were going to get relegated, players like Hudson-Odoi, Alanga, Gibbs-White, Murillo, and others, Chris Wood probably, would all be out the door. And heaven knows what would end up to our famous club. But I think if he can carry on and be loved, and that's often the secret with many players, then he could be a real, really strong asset. And what a buy at £3 million.
Yeah, unbelievable. Do you know, Steve, you're talking about being unsettled and players getting contracts and the summer rebuild. Just wait until we have the Garibaldi Red rebuild this summer. I don't know if you and Mark will still be around. We'll have to see. I think
it starts from the point of view, it depends whether we're invited, doesn't it? And then, whether we get the chance to approve of anything is completely up to the but anyway, you've signed your life away, haven't you, to some little lad who's, after 4 years time, he's going to be taking over from you.
Yes, you've in fact, Steve, you've given me a nice leeway into giving a shout out to the young lad Joshua, who came up to me at the game yesterday, and he asked me if he could take the podcast on, and I said, yeah, of course, mate, in a few years. So he got his little notebook and he made me a contract to sign to say that he has the podcast in 4 years. So shout out to Joshua.
You should get him on.
Yes, well, hopefully we're going to get him on. So fingers crossed. You never know. He might be the next host. He might take over in a couple of weeks.
You've only got 4 years, Steve. Just got hold on for 4 years till we get to work with a good host. Just hang on there, mate.
Yeah, somebody who respects the guests and everything else.
4 years. That's a long time. You might be. Yeah.
Hey, I want to jump on the back of what Steve said very quickly, not to kind of gild the lily too much, but I think Steve's absolutely right. I think we forget that these players are human beings. We see them on, these PR video pieces that come out of the club, these marketing clips, and these, bright young men and tons of money and covered in tattoos and smiling and messing around. And, it just looks like they're on top of the world. And they are. I mean, they're doing the thing we all wish we could have done, right? Played football professionally. What a dream career. But the reality is they have the same trials and tribulations. They have the same mental stresses. They have the same worries and concerns that we all do. And money doesn't take that away exclusively. And I think Callum Hudson-Odoi is a great representation of a confidence player, right? Somebody who needs to know who's loved, who needs to know who's wanted. And I think as well, and again, I don't know him. We only see him, on match day, but he looks to me like a player as well who's eminently coachable. And that's a manager's dream, right? Players who want to listen and learn and get better. And so I think he has all the attributes to not only be around the season, Max, but honestly to be a modern day Forest great. I think he's the kind of player who could be around the City ground for 5 or 6 years and really, rack up some good statistics and become one of those players who's truly loved by the Forest faithful. So hopefully that's what we see from him.
You never know, Mark. By the time you and I are ground hopping at the 2026 World Cup, he might be back in the England squad.
I mean, stranger things have happened.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Where's my invite? That's what I'm asking.
Start saving, Max.
That's 2026, Max. We'll be working with a new host by then.
Brilliant. I can't even come back from that. Right, let's touch on Morgan Gibbs-White, because I've got to give him a mention. This stat came out yesterday evening. Only Ollie Watkins with 12 has more Premier League assists than Morgan Gibbs-White with 10 so far this season. So when you think about Morgan as well, and he has missed a couple of games this season, but not many. But just think about if not if he was in a better team, because that sounds almost disrespectful to Forest and the current players. But if Morgan was in a team like Man City, kind of what contributions he'd offer there, and it just shows how crucial he is to Forest. And Mark, we kind of run out of superlatives to talk about Gibbs-White. He just gets better and better, and he almost leads the line yesterday. And one thing I notice about Morgan as well is his almost can-do attitude, similar to Ryan Yates and even Callum Hudson-Odoi we're touching on there. When he gets fouled or when he loses the ball, he's straight back up and he's there getting it back. And you just feel like he almost bleeds Forest at the minute, Morgan Gibbs-White, kind of on and off the pitch.
Yeah, he's an odd one because, well, first off, he has a song which I think has done a lot for his confidence. As you come back to confidence, we need a song for Callum Hudson-Odoi if one doesn't exist. And I want to suggest Spandau Ballet, Gold. So somebody needs to work with that. Cho, Gold. There's got to be something there. So anyway, coming back to Morgan Gibbs-White, though, he is an odd one because I think you would characterise him as a flair player. And when you generally look at flair players in the Premier League, your Fodens, your Watkins, your Cole Palmers, you generally see them as being exclusively offensive, right? They're carrying the ball, they're dribbling, they're scoring worldies from 20, 25, 30 yards. You don't think about them really putting in the hard yards, rolling up their sleeves and getting back, right? Getting behind the ball. And just giving it all. I think when we think about that in Forest, our attentions immediately turn to Ryan Yates. But Morgan Gibbs-White, he does both sides of it. Like he'll give you the flair plays, he'll link up the attack, but he also gives 110%. I hate using that phrase, but he gives 110%, getting back, hustling, getting behind the ball, getting his tackles in, shouting at the ref, stirring up his teammates. He's been fantastic this year. It really has. I mean, I know a lot's been said about Murillo, and he's our player of the season. I think that's a good shout, but I think my vote would still go to Morgan Gibbs-White. I think he's been the most valuable player for us this season.
You agree there, Steve? You think that, I was actually going to come on to that in terms of player of the season, that you'd be giving it Morgan Gibbs-White, or you'd be tempted to give it to Murillo?
I think I'd give it to Morgan Gibbs-White. I mean, I think Murillo has been fantastic, and I think I'm right in saying he's not missed a game. I mean, there's times he's gone off injured, but I don't think he's missed a game. But I think the team revolves around Gibbs-White. For me, I think he's the captain on the pitch. I think he should probably get that recognition next year. I mean, it was interesting. The last time I was on, I think it was Dave made a point about, how he probably feels that he's got to repay the fee because it's a fee that's going to grow from the original sort of 25 million. But he's a fantastic asset to the club. And you hear people criticize him occasionally. There's a guy behind me criticizes him quite often with his flicks that don't come off. But you can't stop him doing that. You can't say to Morgan Gibbs-White, I only want you to try the 50% of flicks and tricks that work. Don't try the other 50%. And he's clearly built up a relationship now with Hudson-Odoi in the same way as he had last season with Awoniyi. So he's absolutely the focal point for me of the team. I'd build the team around him. I hope he stays.
I mean, that goal yesterday that Callum Hudson-Odoi scored, fantastic goal. I mean, the execution on that goal was fantastic. But that came from Morgan Gibbs-White driving through midfield. The link-up play with him and Alanga, and then a wonderful ball to put Hudson-Odoi in position to be able even to finish that goal. So, yeah, he's in the middle of everything. I agree with Steve. He's the heartbeat.
Yeah, for sure. And it almost is a shame, the media report, that Forest have to sell somebody again to balance PSR. It's not just the media that think that, but staff at the club will know, in terms of balancing the books, as you like, Forest will probably have to sell either Murillo or Morgan Gibbs-White. But you never know. It could be someone else or a few players together. And when you talk about Callum Hudson-Odoi's fee as well, Steve, for just 3 million, and then you look at 40 million, give or take, for Sangari, and just the difference of quality already, and know they're two completely different players. But you just look at professional footballers and how much you pay for them. It's a bargain.
I think you need to be careful making that comparison, Max. I think Sangari came and was played out of position, never got the chance to settle, then went to AFCON, and he's not really in it. And it's not a time to bring him back when we're just trying to be desperate for points. Yeah. And Nuno is trying to get a settled squad. I would really hope that, when we've not really talked about the manager, but whoever leads the team into next season gets a really good pre-season, which includes Sangari, because you don't bring a player in of his level for his fee who's rubbish, but there was some anxiety. My understanding is some anxiety when he first came in is they didn't want to play him in his position because of that last line of defense in front of the back line. If he were to make a mistake, it would shatter his confidence, and then it would be a real disaster. So they played him out of position to not risk him, but playing him out of position didn't allow him to develop in the way that he needed to play his game. That was the way that he was treated. Then he never really got settled into the side. Then he went to AFCON. So he's not really featured. So you could argue, or I will argue, that come next season, he's a new player. And let's not put him on a pedestal and go, it's Sangari's crap. Let's look at him. We've got a £35 million player there that we brought in from PSV. Decided to come to Forest and not play in the Champions League. He's a quality player. So let's give him an opportunity next year.
So I want to just jump in. So I agree. I mean, I'm going to sound maybe a little hypocritical here in that if we sold Sangari this summer and it meant we didn't have to sell NGW or Murillo, I'm perfectly okay with that. That being said, I absolutely agree with everything you just said, Steve, largely because there's two things that players can't control when they come to a club. The circumstances surrounding their arrival, right? And how the coach sees them and how they're going to get played. You have no control over that. You don't get to rock up to any team and say, right, I'm here to play the six. You play me in the six from the start. Off we go. You have no control over that. You step in and you roll the dice. It's up to the coach. The other thing is the transfer fee, right? Again, you have no control over that either. So when I look at what players are signed for, I try not to pay too much attention to that and certainly not let it influence my perspective on that individual. I think it's healthier to kind of amortize almost the cost of the team and say, rather than looking at Sangari at 35 and Cho at 3, instead look at what we spent for this starting 11 and say, does that represent good value for money? Like, was that money well spent? Are we seeing the outcome from the money spent there? And it's difficult to do that because Sangari was such a big ticket item. But I think Steve's right. I think you've got to give him if he's still here, you've got to give him a fair crack of the whip this next season. Yeah. There's no doubt he is a decent player. And hopefully we see more from him next year because we're going to need to. We're going to need to, particularly if Morgan Gibbs-White, is out the door between now and next season.
Let's wait and see. I think there's kind of a lot of rumours of who will leave and who will be offered contracts. You forget that players like Harry Arter are still at the football club, which is just beyond.
When's it end? When's his contract over? I know it's this summer.
Next Sunday, Mark.
Okay. All right. Good deal.
He might feature against Burnley. You never
Wouldn't
know.
that be awesome if he came off?
We should all turn up at Burnley in Harry Arter masks.
He does have a song as well. Coming back to my earlier comment, doesn't Harry Arter have a song?
No, I don't think so. I think that probably I can't remember.
If he does, Mark, it's probably no longer worth repeating.
He's been with the team so long. If he has a song, it must be set to the tune of a Frank Sinatra song, I would imagine.
Let's touch on the summer, even though we have got one game left and providing Forest don't lose 12-0 next Sunday. I keep saying it in case it honestly does, but it will be okay. It will be all over next Sunday, and then the summer ahead, the rebuild starts then. Steve, you touched on there about Sangari and which manager comes through the door and whatnot. You still think that Forest should keep Nuno? I know that you like talking about stability and you think that we should have stability. I can see you kind of umming and ahhing there, but do you think that Nuno's the right man to lead us forward, or would you be tempted to make a change and get someone in to have a full summer? And they've got to make the change quickly, so they've got as much time as possible with the squad for pre-season.
I think it's a really difficult decision. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for stability, and I've always banged on about that. Personally, I'm just not convinced that Nuno's the right guy to take us forward. I'm, you know, I was looking at some stuff on Twitter earlier, or X on earlier, and you know, there's a real balance of comments on fans, and it's probably 50-50 about whether you keep him or whether you let him go. And the 50 in favour would say we need stability and we are playing a more attacking style, but we need to sort out the defence. And the 50 who are not are saying, well, he hasn't really pulled up any trees, excuse the pun. And, you know, our performances, our points total haven't significantly improved, which they haven't. And I don't think he's got, I don't think there's this, it's going to be impossible, isn't it, to have the same rapport with the fans as Steve Cooper had. But there's lots of characters and personalities out there that would look to develop that rapport with the fans. And it just doesn't strike me as there's no inspiration comes from him. There were some people walking away from the ground yesterday saying, you know, on 85 minutes yesterday, he was standing on the touchline, twiddling his thumbs and arms crossed. And I made the point a few weeks ago, it's exactly the same as happened at Everton. We were 1-0 down at Everton. We hadn't got the third penalty or third potential penalty. And he was just standing there on the touchline with his arms crossed and not cajoling anybody, not encouraging anybody. Murillo came over for a drink. He never spoke to him, whereas Sean Dyche was up and around everyone. And I'm not saying that Sean Dyche would be right for us, but I think we need somebody on that touchline who's more animated, who the crowd and the fans can relate to. And I just don't see it being him. But I'm not sure who's available and who's around. I mean, there's going to be something of a manager merry-go-round this summer, isn't there? You know, when you look at what Oliver Glasner has done at Crystal Palace, we missed a trick there, really, didn't we? By comparison, you have to say. So I'm really, really not convinced. And I'd be very happy if we made a change, but it needs to be made a week on Monday to give anybody coming in the door absolute, you know, the maximum amount of time to do it. If we didn't change him, of course I'd support him. You know, he's my club's manager, but I'd have a question mark.
You agree there, Mark, because the football has been better since Nuno's come in, but you just wonder whether if you'd have kept Steve Cooper, where Forest would be now, and if buts and maybes, and that's the you know, everyone talks about it in football. What did Billy Davies used to say? Fine margins and all of that. But I mean, do you think Nuno is the right man still, or would you make a change as Steve alluded to?
As you know, I'm not shy in voicing an opinion. This is one of the rare occasions where I feel like I need to sit on the fence because I genuinely don't know how I feel about this. I mean, I understand what Steve's saying in terms of the type of manager, but I think there's more than one way to manage. Just like there's more than one way. There's more than one way to skipper, right? Some people feel like MGW should be the skipper. Others feel it should be Yates. You know, everyone has their preference. They like what they like and they know what they want to see. And I don't know that for me that has a particular bearing. Like I'm not looking for a particular style of manager. What I'm looking more for is, do I see the influence of the manager on the team? Do I feel like what has happened to this team since Nuno came in has elevated it above and beyond what we were doing with Steve Cooper? Is there a delta between what went before and where we are today? And on occasion there has been. You know, we've seen some high point performances. I mean, yesterday was a good one. The game against City was a good one. Nuno's first game against Newcastle. There have been moments. And then you have to ask the question, okay, so is that Nuno? Or is that just the players showing up that day? Right? So I don't know, Max. Like I said, I'm firmly on the fence for this one. I think I'm probably, though, at the end of the day, I'm where Steve is, in as much as if opening game of next season, Nuno's on the touchline, I'm not going to be ticked off about it. By the same token, I'm not going to be crying into my pillow if it's some other fella.
Yeah, we'll have to see. It'll become interesting what direction the club goes in, not just with the manager, but with everything really this summer, and a huge rebuild project. And one thing,
what do you think, Max? What do you think? Do you think Nuno's delivered on what Marinakis asked for? No, seriously, because the remit was keep us in the division. I mean, by the skin of our teeth, we're in the division.
Yeah, I just wonder when the Marinakis ownership made a change, did they expect, this is before points deductions even came, and surely the ownership knew that Forest were close. I think they did, but they probably wanted it to be slightly better. I
Max,
think
not think they did. They absolutely knew that they were going to that they were going to come across PSR. Absolutely.
and I think that they thought they could do better in terms of a league position and finish. I just think, we're not talking about challenging for Europe here, given when Cooper departed, we were near the other end of the table. But I think they're so ambitious, and they almost have a plan in their head that Forest, whether you agree with it or not, they want Forest to finish in Europe in the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely.
And has the last 6 months with Nuno shown that we can finish in Europe? Probably not.
That's exactly the question, Max. You've taken us to exactly the right conclusion on that, which is, so I said, the remit was keeping the division. We're in the division, but to your point, Max, that wasn't the ultimate remit. I think this was a job interview for Nuno to say, keep us in the division, and ... Are you the guy that takes us up challenging for top 8, top 6? Whatever lofty heights Marinakis has in mind. And I don't think we've seen evidence enough yet of that. So it'll be interesting to see what Marinakis thinks, because at the end of the day, that's the only opinion that matters.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see a change, certainly soon as well, and another manager coming. And I think their fairy tale is a big name. I think they really want somebody with a big name. No disrespect to Nuno and, of course, Steve Cooper, but I just have an impression that the ownership will want a big name to be in charge of Forest. It's their dream, and adds to that European fairy tale as well. Got to touch on it, talking about the ownership and off the field issues about the City Ground and stay-in and talks this week. I mean, there was an article released by Danny Taylor for The Athletic, where he interviewed the chairman, Tom Cartledge. Many chants were around the City Ground yesterday. I've got to say it, so excuse the French, but Toten's a shithole, I'd rather stay here, which did make me laugh. Do you agree with that, Steve? I know you're involved with the Supporters Trust, so you might have dialogues and discussions with the club this summer. What do you think, and almost what's your stance on it in terms of moving and ground redevelopment?
So I think it's a really complex question, and let me try and explain that. It's not a simple, do we go or do we stay? I think, and we as the Trust believe strongly that whatever the decision is, there has to be some open dialogue. The way that the news came out this week, and not everybody would, but credit to Danny Taylor for getting the story and publishing the story, because what a remarkable reaction that then caused yesterday. That's not the way to do it. Club, Tom Cartledge, the way to do it is actually to have a dialogue with the people who are important, which are the fans, and to get some viewpoints into the conversation. Ultimately, the decision might still be to move, and if it is, it's a purely commercial decision, and it's nothing to do, I feel, personal view, about is there a dispute with the council? Are we being charged too much? Is the amount that the council want too much? I mean, it's a bit of, I feel that's a bit of a red herring. It's convenient at the moment to go, right, the council are not playing ball. We don't want the rental raised from $250,000 to, the figures that are being bandied around are sort of around $1 million. We're a Premier League side, for heaven's sake. I mean, £750,000 is going to keep Harry Arter employed for about 4 months. So, next season we can certainly afford it if that's where we choose to spend our money. What is clear, and I've been a season ticket holder for 47 years now, is the City Ground is special. Now, it's a very emotional place, and football is a very, very emotional sport. So when things are going well, you wouldn't want to be anywhere else than the City Ground. When things are not going well, it's just another stadium. And there've been plenty of times in the last 47 years when it's been both. But it is our heritage. It is our history. And whether you're an old fan like me, have been going for many years, or a young fan like you, and you've come into it more recently, it's a very, very special place. So if the decision of the ownership is going to be that we need to move, or they feel we need to move, then I believe that they need to pay due respect to that decision and pay due respect to the people who it's going to affect, i.e. the fans in the stadium, the fans who'd want to be in the stadium. They need to be able to have some consultation. It needs to be an open process. They can't just, I mean, I sent a tweet out earlier. I don't think they can impose a stadium change on us in the same way they've imposed season card price, great, huge season card prices for some people this year. There has to be a dialogue. There was no dialogue around the season card prices. There was a presentation made to the FAB. This is all in the public domain. There was a presentation made to the FAB, and then a few days later, the new ticket prices were released. There wasn't any consultation in any sense of the word consultation. So I and we as the trust would really support, and indeed the wider FAB, which includes a number of, obviously, Forza, Punjabi Reds, a number of sort of supporters groups, the American, the US group. There needs to be some dialogue. There needs to be some conversation. There needs to be somebody saying, look, guys, we have a stadium that's 30,000. We need to do something with it because we're not getting the revenue to survive. We can increase it to 40,000, and actually, if we do that, we're going to have to change all four stands, because all four stands are in various states of disrepair, woeful facilities, not treating us as Premier League customers, if that's an interesting word. So there's a huge expense around that. But it is our family home. And there needs to be some respect of our family home, I believe. If at the end of the day, somebody says, do we as a fan group want to compete with the Man Cities, the Arsenals, the Man United, the Spurs, the Chelseas, etc.? Yes, we do. Do we want to do it consistently a long term? Yes, we do. Then we're going to need a 50, 60,000 seater stadium. And the City Ground can't be converted into that. So therefore, the only choice is, okay, at that stage, we need to find a new place to go and play football. But that's the process. Once you've decided on we need a new stadium, then you go and find somewhere. And let's be honest, this is not a 2-month or 6-month or a 1-year decision. This is going to take 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years to get to that stage. And then at that stage, where's the best location to accommodate all the desires and emotions and wishes, not only of the fans who do come to the ground, but also the city of Nottingham, the people of Nottingham, the businesses that are going to get affected, all the infrastructure around it. I mean, if you're an away fan or you're a home fan that comes into the city on the train, how the hell do you get to Towton from the city, from Nottingham Station? An immediate question. Yeah, you need to put a tram line in. Yeah, but a tram line doesn't come cheap, so that needs the council's consideration. So this is not a 2-second conversation. Yeah, the city, the council are not playing ball. The City Ground's not big enough, so we're going to move, and let's look at Towton, or let's look at the site in the city centre near Binks Yard, or let's look at the A453 coming into Nottingham, or let's look at Ratcliffe Power Station, etc. You can't, I believe, you can't make that decision just like that. There's a whole process you've got to go through if you want to keep people on board. If you don't want to keep people on board and just want to stick a finger up to them, then make the decision. But I thought it was remarkable yesterday that the singing that came out, because it wasn't planned. Nobody had put it together. There was nothing on Twitter beforehand. Right, in this minute, let's sing this. And I posted a message to a couple of friends. I hoped that the management of the club were not only there, but were listening. And when I drove home, it was interesting. On Radio Nottingham, they were saying that probably about 15, 20 minutes after the game, Evangelos Marinakis and Tom Cartledge were on the pitch, and Marinakis was pointing at various stands, almost as though And this was the inference from Radio Nottingham. Right, let's do that one, and then we'll do that one, and then we'll do that one, and let's have a go at that one, or what we're going to do with each of those, as opposed to let's collapse them all and go somewhere else. Now, that's pure speculation, pure conjecture. But there has to be a dialogue. Rant over.
Spot on. It's a very, very, very good rant. I think you speak for many people, Steve, including me. Mark, just before we go, any final thoughts from on the ground or from what Steve said there?
No, I'm definitely not going to try and gild that particular lily. Clip it up and put it out there. Steve nailed it. Fantastic. Good job, Steve. Won't be just us going to the final game of the season, evidently. Arsenal just taking the lead against Man United, for those that are interested.
Excellent.
Yeah, fantastic. Very happy about that. No, in closing, Max, just one thing for any of our American listeners, viewers. It's American Mother's Day over here. So to all the American moms, happy Mother's Day. Hope you have a great one. Yeah.
Very nice. That's lovely. What a nice note to end on. I've got a few notes to end on. Sarah messaged me to say, can we give a shout out to Neil, Stephen and Sam from Sutton and Ashfield, who met Sarah yesterday and said they were big fans of the podcast.
No, you got to be on the podcast, Sarah, to share messages. Sorry, Sarah. No, we're editing that. No.
Bless her. No. She's having a day of rest on a Sunday.
On a Sunday? Good grief.
Oh, yeah. See, whereas I'm working. Give me a pay rise, eh? Right. That does us nicely. I think we will see you this week for our last preview before the last game of the season away at Burnley. I am still deciding whether to wear my Hawaiian shirt. Steve, are you going to join me wearing one?
Well, this is going to sound a bit sad. The only way I could absolutely guarantee a ticket for Burnley next week, because you and I know that there's a group of us that go, and I end up being the ticket master because that's a strange phrase, isn't it? Because usually people are at work, and us sort of people who can manage your own time. And I knew this time I wasn't going to be able to do that because I was away in a meeting. So we've taken the bold decision, 5 of us, to go down the corporate train and pay an arm and a leg. So I'm not sure that Hawaiian shirts at the corporate do for Forest would be wholly appropriate, but we will be there, Max, cheering as we always do. It'll be my 32nd Forest game of the season. So I don't know if you get a medal for that, but as you don't get a medal for 47 years, why should you get a medal for 32?
Enjoy your prawn sandwiches.
I was just about to say that while I'm slumming it in the away end with the wooden seats there are in Burnley's away end.
Yeah, no, we'll still be in the wooden seats, Max.
Oh, right. Is it still?
We're still in the wooden seats, but we will get a little bit of catering beforehand, and there's a conversation with one of the ex-players. I don't know. I don't think it's been completely confirmed yet, but we'll see. I'll look forward to seeing you in your Hawaiian shirt, you and your brother and your dad, on Sunday, Max.
I'll give you a wave. Welsh just
look forward to it.
Filling your face with prawn sandwiches. Right.
I will be down at the pub, just so you know.
Okay.
Good. I'm going to the pub with an Arsenal fan, so hopefully I'll be happy, and we'll see if he's agonising like a Forest fan.
Yeah. Well, you don't realise, Mark, but if Forest do blow this 12 goal difference, you're presenting the podcast next week.
No, we've already got a replacement, Max. It's just a very young guy, but Mark and I can lead him through. It'll be no problem.
Yes, I'm sure. Good luck to him. That's all I'm going to say. Right, Sarah, we'll see you this week for a Q&A. I will be back with the preview, and then season's finished, but we'll talk about all of that in due course before we go into the Euros and everything like that. Do give us a like, share, and subscribe if you did enjoy this episode of Garibaldi Red on YouTube. Thanks for all your comments and interactions whilst watching this live. And if you're listening back on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, follow us and leave us a review on there. It really helps us. Thanks for all the support as well. We've hit record numbers recently. So thank you, and we look forward to creating more in the next few months. I can't end it with a pun because I can't think of anything. I can't end it with a sing-song because I can't think of anything. So Mark, Steve, you'll be pleased to know contracts are signed. You're still in next season. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Good
to see you, Mark. Thank you.